Choosing Life by ginnyrules27. Chapter 35. Ben woke up with a small smile on his face, as had been the case ever since his twins were born. Waking up every day next to the woman he loved, knowing his kids were safe and sound, what more could a father ask for? Hearing the gentle snores of his wife, Ben gently slipped out from under the covers, though he frowned slightly at the ease he was able to do so. Normally, both he and Mal would be pinned to the bed by their Cerberus until said dogs decided it was time for breakfast, or to go and romp around the castle.
Maybe Dean let them out, or Mrs. Potts did if she came in earlier and we missed her,
Ben thought as he made his way out of the room, and over to the nursery to check on his kids. Of course, he had to smile as he walked in. The mystery of the missing Cerberus answered.
"So this is where you two were,"
Ben whispered, as he saw Estelle and Nyx lying on the floor in front of Stephanie and Maurice's cribs.
"You were on pup protection, huh?"
Estelle looked up and nodded, giving Ben a doggy grin as Nyx continued to slumber away.
"Good boy,"
Ben smiled.
"Anything to report?"
Before Estelle had a chance to respond, Stephanie started to whimper softly. Ben quickly made his way over and picked her up.
"What's wrong, my sweet girl?"
Ben asked, keeping his voice down as to not wake up Maurice.
"You hungry? Need a change? Just want to be held?"
Judging by how Stephanie's whimpers seemed to die down as she was held in her father's arms, Ben got the answer to his question.
"It's okay, sweetheart. Papa will hold you for as long as you need,"
Ben whispered, going over to sit in the nearby rocker. It was amazing how much Stephanie had grown even in the past few months, something Ben attributed to her divine and fae background. Yes, she was still a baby, but the wisps of hair that had been there at birth had developed into full strands of light brown hair, though there were a few strands that were obviously blue and purple.
"Looks like you got some of your mammal's genes too,"
Ben thought with a small smile.
"Good. It means you won't always be compared to me or how I was as a baby. Plus, it means people will stop asking Mal if she adopted you. I love the general populace of Oradon, but sometimes they can be missing a few blood cells, as your Uncle Chip would say."
Though Ben had to smile as he thought of Mal's retorts to such questions, his favourites being, "How can she be adopted if she's a twin?" and "Considering I saw the doctors pull her out of me, I can assure you there was no adoption." Which, considering how some members of Oradon's populace acted, considering Lady Steph's adoption of Mal, you would think they'd understand the first time Mal had to say it. Meanwhile, Maurice had clearly inherited his mother's purple hair. No sign of Ben's genetics evidence there at all. Ben didn't mind in the slightest, though. He loved looking at Mal's hair when the sun shone through it, and having a mini Mal was more than he could ever ask for.
"I think Mal's just happy that neither of the kids inherited her eyes, though they did manage to get the gold flecks that Mal has in hers," Ben thought as he continued to rock Stephanie. "I don't completely understand why, but her eyes are beautiful after all. But if she's happy, I'm happy. Besides, in a few years, we'll try to give Stephanie and Maurice a brother or sister, and maybe they'll have Mal's eyes."
They had talked about it one night when they were both relaxing after the twins had gone to bed. "Ben, our children are infants," Mal said as she looked over at her husband. "Not to mention, you're not the one who'll have to carry this hypothetical child."
I know, Mal," Ben said, "and I get it. Trust me.
Mal gave Ben a small yet knowing smile and took his hand. "Ben, I won't lie. I love the idea of Stephanie and Maurice having a sibling. Gods know I enjoyed living with Haddie. Well, minus about 6 weeks after he was born, but that was practically a blip, so it doesn't count. I want the kids to have a younger sibling if we're lucky enough, but they're not even a year old." Ben had sighed, but nodded. deciding not to comment on Mal's statement of not liking Hattie after he was born. If Mal wanted to expand on that, she would.
So you're saying you want to table the conversation?
Maybe until the kids are 5, Mal offered. Ben, I'm only in my 20s after all. That'll still give us time to have more kids. Plus, I'm a godling and a fae. The mortal biological system isn't exactly something I'm bound to.
That is a good point. Ben nodded. Plus, if the babies end up getting our familial powers, we'll have some time to help them adjust before bringing another baby into the mix.
Exactly, Mal nodded. Though I'm not going to lie, I'm a little concerned. Dad said I got really hot as a baby, and that was a sign of my magic coming in. We haven't seen that with Stephanie and Maurice.
Mal, don't forget, you were a baby under a magical barrier,
Ben said, gently brushing a bit of hair out of his wife's eyes.
Not to mention, despite the gift your uncle gave me at our wedding, I'm still human. Just with some slightly beastly enhancements. It might take some more time for our kids to have their powers come in than you did.
How do you always know what to say to calm me down?
It's a gift,
Ben said with a smile, before gently kissing the top of Mal's head.
Now, come on. Let's get some shut-eye.
A knock on the twins' door broke Ben out of his thoughts.
Come in. Pardon me, sire, Dean said, poking his head into the nursery. But when you weren't in your office, some of the other attendants suggested I check in here. I hope you don't mind the intrusion. Not at all, Dean,
Ben said, as he smiled at his chief attendant. Dean had practically been a third shadow to Ben when he was in school, and if Ben was honest, he had no idea where he'd be without Dean. Hiya! Dean flushed as a small voice came from the doorway, and a little girl poked her head out from where she'd seemed to be carried on Dean's back.
Apologies, Your Highness. Our sitter called out unexpectedly, and I didn't think you'd mind if I brought Dawn. I can assure you, she shouldn't be a distraction, and I should be able to get my work done. Dean, it's fine, Ben said with a small smile. I'm not going to turn your child away or make your life harder. Not after everything you've done for me. Though if you needed the day off, you could have asked.
Dean raised an eyebrow. With all due respect, sire, when was the last time you took a day off? If you're working, so am I. Ben gave his chief assistant a smile before looking over at Dawn.
Do you want to come and meet Stephanie?
Dawn nodded softly, and Dean smiled as he walked her into the nursery.
Be very quiet, okay, sweetheart? Prince Maurice seems to still be sleeping,
Dean said, keeping his voice down while sneaking a glance at the very silent prince. While he knew not much could happen to the purple-haired princeling, what with being a godling and all, Dean still wanted to make sure nothing had happened to the prince during the night.
This is Stephanie,
Ben said, as Dean knelt down so that Dawn could see the baby easier.
Stephanie, meet Dawn.
Dawn smiled as Stephanie looked up at her, the younger baby cooing in delight. Hiya, Effie!
Sire, I am so sorry. You know, with young kids, words are hard. Dean, do you really think I'm going to be upset over your daughter giving mine a nickname?
Ben said.
Melody said Maddie calls Emily Emmy, and Gil's told me numerous times about how Gwen shortened Marcos's name to Marky. Nicknames happen, especially with young kids. Besides, I think Mal will just be upset she wasn't here to hear it happen for the first time, Ben thought. As well, if your daughter's anything like you, Dean, chances Effie here will have an assistant of her own. Well, if Dawn wants to, of course. Hey, speaking of your future careers. Hey, Dean. Yes, sir? Akio's at least 23 now. Possibly 24, right?
Considering he's your age, that would mean you are correct, sire. Why? Ben shook his head.
Akio said, back when we were in school, that Arendelle does their coronations at 21. However, King Kristoff and Queen Anna are still on the throne. I was just making sure I wasn't wrong on Akio's age.
Ah, well, you see. There's a reason why Prince Akio hasn't been given solitary control over Arendelle, sire.
And why is that? Would you entrust Prince Akio with the power to control the kingdom? Ben opened his mouth and then closed it once more. Dean had a point. Oh, don't get Ben wrong, he loved his best friend. But there was no denying that particular band of insanity that the blonde carried with him. How do you know that? About Akio and everything? Ben asked as he gently bounced Stephanie, the baby starting to fuss in his arms. Servants and attendants talk, Dean shrugged. Plus, I needed to reach out to make sure I was putting the correct title on the congratulations card after Princess Emily was born. You know Akio and Al wouldn't have taken offense. I'm aware, but I'd rather be the job done correctly the first time, other than it not be right at all. Oh, that reminds me. I've gone through your paperwork, sire, and these are the items that need your direct attention. I've printed out a summary as well. It's on the top there. Dean, did you sleep at all? Ben asked as he looked at the binder Dean seemingly pulled out of thin air. Dean once again raised an eyebrow as he placed the binder on a nearby dresser. Your Highness, I mean no disrespect, but are you really the best person to ask about someone else's sleep schedule? I've made improvements to my sleep schedule, and that's something we all commend your Highness for. But that doesn't answer my question. Ben pouted slightly. You know, in some cultures they respect their king. And, as I believe Lady Emma once told you, your Highness, in those cultures the king didn't spend years trying to get people to not treat him as a king. Dean said, shaking his head. I feel like you and Emma teaming up is a bad thing, Ben said. Really? You said the same thing when Queen Amal and I teamed up, as you put it. Dean said with a small chuckle. And I meant it, Ben said, just as Maurice seemed to wake up from his slumber. Dean, would you mind getting him? I hate to ask, but my hands are full with Stephanie. Of course not, your Highness, Dean said, and gently picked up the fussing baby. Dawn, do you want to come and meet Prince Maurice? Dean nodded slowly, toddling over to her father. Hi, Maurice, she said softly. Makes sense Maurice would get a nickname too, Ben said with a smile as he quickly cut off any apologies Dean looked ready to make. And I think my kids are hinting that it's time for breakfast. Dean, have you eaten? Yes? Were you asking me or telling me, Dean? Dean sighed and shook his head. You do know why I'm not your children, right, sire? Doesn't matter. You're still one of my friends. And I want to make sure you're taking care of yourself, Ben said. So from what I'm gathering, you haven't eaten yet, correct? Yes, sire. I got caught up in summarizing the paperwork and then getting Dawn some breakfast. Ben nodded. Happens to the best of us. Amir and Akio have even said they've forgotten to eat while taking care of their kids. And do you remember what those two were like in school? I believe Prince Akio was always pushing a sandwich onto you to make sure you had eaten, sire. You got that right, Ben nodded. And on that note, we should probably wake my wife so she can get something to eat as well. Will Queen Mal be taking a dragon flight today? Dean asked. She hasn't mentioned it, though I know she's missed being able to do it while she was carrying the twins, Ben said. Why? I just wanted to know so I could alert the guards that there would be no need to panic, Dean said. It's been so long since Queen Mal went on a dragon flight that I think some of the guards have forgotten that she doesn't only dragon up when there's a threat to the kingdom. Ben nodded. Dean had a point. Since Mal became pregnant, they had hired on additional guards to be stationed near Stephanie and Maurice's rooms. What? There may not have been any villains in Oridon, but every parent knew the stories of what happened to Queen Rapunzel when she was a baby. Not to mention Mal had been kidnapped from her loving parents while she was mere months old, not to be reunited with them until she was 5. Ben might have been overprotective, but he would be damned if he let anything like that happen to his kids. But anyway, since the new guards had never actually experienced Mal's dragon flights, it would stand to reason that Dean would need to alert them not to panic upon seeing Mal in her dragon form. I'll keep you appraised, and if Mal decides to take a flight, We'll make sure to let you know so that you can keep the guards updated," he said.
Dean nodded.
"Understood, sire." "Now then, how about we get these three to Mrs. Potts so they can get some breakfast before I wake up my wife?"
Ben suggested as he stood up, Stephanie still secured in his arms. "I think that's a wonderful idea, Your Highness." Dean nodded, and the group quickly made their way out of the nursery, the two Cerberoi plodding after them, as they also heard the promise of food. End of chapter. Hi guys, hope you enjoyed that one. I love this. It's so domestic. Ben just being a good dad and sharing dad advice with Dean, who is actually sassing him back. I love that. The sassy assistant is such a good trope. Anyway, you guys know the drill. Like, comment and subscribe and hit that bell to get notified for whenever I upload a new video. Have a good day, night, or whatever time zone you're in. Bye my guys, gals and albino pals. I'll see you in another video. Take care.